For this interview, I'm joined by Rashid Wahab and Guy Nakamura of the TrackTogether team. We've been working with the team at TrackTogether for a few months now. They contacted us when we started our project around the month of April, and we had a call for anyone needing help with data around COVID-19, and they were actually one of the first organizations joining us. Guy, you've been working on a symptom tracker app for a few months now, sharing some of this data collected through your app with academics. Was that always the goal?
Yeah, I'd say so. Rashid and I started TrackTogether about 3 months ago. So when COVID-19 was really first coming to public attention in the UK, we actually started with every intention of it being a quick weekend project. And this was ultimately because lockdown measures weren't in place, there was inadequate testing, and neither the government nor the public really had any idea what this virus meant and what we were facing. So in light of that lack of information, we built the first web version of TrackTogether, with the ultimate ambition of offering people better visibility of the disease in their communities, and with every intent to share this data with both academic institutions and public health authorities around the world. So,
thank you. Rash, so the collaboration that when we started our collaboration, it was around opening data, or at least it became about opening data. You've been now publishing anonymized open data from the data you've been collecting through the app. Now it's gone through several iterations. I was curious to hear from you, what would you say were the easiest and hardest facets of that work?
Yeah, so the hardest part was definitely setting up the entire pipeline from the raw data set to the open data set, and understanding some of the pitfalls in it, and understanding what can be shared and what can't be shared. So obviously the ODI helped us a lot there, understanding that at country level we can share data, but maybe not at postcode level, given that within a postcode and an age, having those two together, you could potentially identify a single person. That was one of the issues. Also, we started opening up the data quite late, so we hadn't set up the pipeline. We didn't value open data as much as we should have from the start, and had we known, we would have introduced this pipeline with our development pipeline. So one of the things that was quite easy in that going forward was using GitHub, and understanding, with the ODI's help, understanding that's the platform to go forward with. As an application engineer, very familiar with GitHub. And there was music to my ears being able to use it.
Thank you, Rashid. So the next step in the collaboration that we've had, and it was no longer just about you publishing data, but really starting a coordination with a number of other teams. There are quite a few symptom trackers, not just in the UK, but internationally. And your ambition seems to be to harmonize the work done with COVID-19 symptom tracking data. Guy, I'd like to hear from you. Where did this impetus to do that harmonization come from? And why did you decide to explore standardization and harmonization rather than, if I can give a provocation, rather than merging all the apps into fewer apps or just one?
Yeah, of course. I think as we gained traction and the severity of the virus really started to come to light, we realized just how important the work we'd done was. We'd started to come across more and more similar initiatives, whether citizen, government, or company-led, and each and every one of them had very similar ambition to share this data with health authorities, academics, and other various parties. And these trackers were ultimately popping up everywhere, from Brazil to Vietnam to the UK and the US. And ultimately, while in the UK, collaboration was starting to take place through the government-led Project Oasis, which we are a part of, kind of led by the J-Hub and the NHSX, we always had a much broader goal and a more transparent, or should I say open goal, than that of Oasis, because that data is ultimately going to the government. And of course, we hope they put it to good use, but we thought there was a broader need for this, as we saw that the virus wasn't just affecting the UK or the US, it's a global pandemic. And I guess why standardization rather than the other approach of merging? I think there are a few reasons for this. One really was the speed at which we were all moving. I mean, course, as kind of initially a two-man project, but we are a much broader kind of volunteer team now. We were able to deliver really quickly, whereas governments obviously take time with due diligence and bureaucracy. So lots of manpower have been invested by various projects, and I think it would have been too tough an ask to really get them to merge into one. Secondly, I think there was a lot of value in the varied approaches taken by these trackers. For example, we placed a lot of emphasis on our social influencer campaign to grow our audience. And we naturally meant that would be hitting a different demographic to, say, COVID symptom study. And then thirdly, I guess, merging all of this into one app would raise a lot of questions about who owns the data, where is the data sitting, and how it's ultimately going to be used. So I think there's a huge benefit in having all these various actors in the space.
A quick follow-up question to you, Guy. If standards are important, why do you think that one hasn't quite emerged yet, or has one emerged yet that you're seeing that needs to get people around it?
No, nothing really, which is why we've ultimately come to the ODI for help on this. I think it's been very difficult because there have been so many unknowns in this. We've never faced this sort of situation previously. And as I said, there's so many different actors in the space. So we are just ultimately a volunteer organization, but then you've got governments and different third-party companies working on this. And I think ultimately we haven't had the time for that coordination. And as you've rightly pointed out, this does take time. And we've only been kind of months into the pandemic so far. So I'd say that is why there hasn't been one yet, but there is very much a huge need for it.
Great. So I'm going to follow up with a question to you, Rush, again in the same space about stewardship and organization, but more about the long term, because there is a case to be made perhaps about the fact that symptom tracking was only useful at the very beginning to try and understand the pandemic as it was unfolding. What would you say to someone thinking that symptom tracking is yesterday's news? And who do you think this data that you've been collecting is useful for in the long run?
So, what we found with the TrackTogether project was how the use of the data evolved over time and with different parties coming into play. With a single set of data, the use managed to evolve. Initially, it was a public application that people be able to see data within their area. Saw a lot of mapping happening. That later evolved when we had the J-Hub, NHS involved, and some universities. We were able to provide specific data for their research. And going forward, I think the applications are fairly endless. I think there are applications in business. I think we've seen emerging economies, particularly in education, which is one of my job. So in education, we've seen people move from schools to homes, and I think in the use of business intelligence, you can see how symptoms over time, how they changed, and how that affected children in schools, and how that shifted an economy. That's just one usage, but I think we'll see this data being used a lot for business intelligence, a lot merged with public health initiatives, a lot understanding demographics. So I think those are just some examples. I think we're that's just with this small data set. I think going forward, symptom tracking, with our standards we get into place, hopefully I think we get a framework together to fight any future pandemic, any future disease, any future effects of public health. And I think that's how it's evolved. So something so small, or something small, has evolved from pet project to researchers to potential commercial applications. So that's how data is useful in the long term.
Well, that's all we have time for, but this is a great way to finish on all the possible impact of this data if it's shared, and if it's shared more consistently. So I'm looking forward to working with you on that. Rashid, Guy from TrackTogether, many thanks for your time.